NBA players, especially at the turn of the century, have made astronomical amounts of money, millions upon tens of millions, sometimes even hundreds of millions. You would think that they'd be set for life, that they'd accumulate enough wealth for their families to be good forever, to be passed down from generation to generation, to make sure their future family members will live comfortably. Unfortunately, as we all know, that's not the case. Plenty of people are not responsible. In fact, most of them aren't. Not just athletes, but most upper-class folks in general. According to NASDAQ, 70% of families lose their wealth by the second generation, and 90% lose it all by the third generation. Things like poor management, poor life choices and decisions and investments, and not enough guidance in their lives. All of these things affect NBA players as well. In fact, 60% of NBA players go broke within 5 years of retirement. Pretty freaking crazy. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today let's talk about 8 NBA players who lost all of their money in their own interesting way. How did they manage to lose it all? And what's been going on with their lives today? Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. Number 8, Antoine Walker. 3-time All-Star, $108 million earned throughout his career. Walker was well known among basketball circles. Even before entering the NBA, he was an absolute stud in college and the 6th overall pick in the legendary '96 class. But just 2 years after retiring, Walker filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2010. What happened? Well, a bunch of things. Growing up poor, Walker wanted him and all his family and friends to live an extravagant lifestyle. He'd spend loads of money on cars, on jewelry, houses, not just for himself, but also a huge number of his friends. Walker apparently helped approximately 30 other people move into better situations, and freely gave them cash without even making them pay him back. When addressing this, he stated, "I gave them whatever they wanted and spoiled them. You can't do that. It ended up being an open ATM throughout my career. I created a very expensive lifestyle. That's how you lose your wealth real bad at the beginning." To make matters worse, he retired around the same time as the 2008 recession, so his real estate firm went downhill and he had to pay $20 million to the banks. To add on to that even further, Walker also filed false checks and had to pay millions in gambling debts too. As you can tell, it's no surprise that he lost it all, but he used his tragic story as a way to educate others. Nowadays, he's a spokesman for young athletes, traveling to universities to educate them to not make the same mistakes he did. Despite his struggles, it's cool to see him turn it into something positive. Number 7, Larry Johnson. You might recognize him for his dominance in Charlotte, or his iconic 4-point play in New York, or his appearance in Space Jam. Johnson made over $83 million through NBA salaries. But by 2015, he filed for bankruptcy. What drained most of his cash was due to child support payments. Larry has 5 children with 4 different women, or at least that's what we know. It could be more. This issue came to light when one of his baby mamas, Laura Tate, wanted Johnson to pay $900,000 in child support that he owed. But Johnson couldn't pay it, and even tried to get Tate to abort her baby a long time ago. A few years later, he also skimped out on a $2,700 dentist bill in 2017. He couldn't even pay for that either. Fortunately, the Knicks gave him a chance and hired him as a business operations representative. So he's back to being part of the NBA scene, but this time behind the curtains. Number 6, Erick Strickland. You probably have never heard of him. Strickland was an undrafted player of the '96 class and went on to have a solid 8-year career, where he earned $13 million. But what's interesting was how he lost all that money. Strickland is a good example of why you should not let a family member or close friend handle your finances, and instead, you should find someone with actual experience. Strickland's father managed his money and used it to buy a plot of land on sale for $1.8 million. Apparently, according to, quote, a friend of a friend, he said it was appraised at $3 million, so this was a good deal, right? No, it turns out that appraisal was fake, and it wasn't worth nearly as much as the price he bought it for. Along with many other bad investments from his family members, Strickland quickly went bankrupt and lost everything he earned. For an undrafted player to live out his dream and then lose everything? That's gotta hurt. Number 5. Latrell Sprewell. I'm sure you've all heard of the legendary quote, "I've got a family to feed." Well, it looks like that became the reality. In 2004, Sprewell turned down a 3-year, $21 million contract because he felt he was worth way more than that. But after rejecting it, he didn't get any other significant offers. Despite making nearly $100 million over his career, his negative attitude and his overall incompetence when it came to money management shouldn't be any surprise. In 2007, he walked out on his own family, and he got sued for $200 million for doing that. A few months later, his yacht got repossessed because he couldn't pay for it. And he couldn't pay his $1.5 million mortgage on his first mansion either. In 2009, he lost his second mansion as well and also owed $3 million in back taxes. So, as of 2015, he got no home, no family, and rents out an apartment like most middle-class residents. I guess he should have accepted that $21 million offer back in 2004, but then again, he probably would have blown that too. Number 4. Derrick Coleman. Coleman's destruction of wealth was quite different than the norm. He wasn't a huge spender on luxury goods, he wasn't a gambler, he wasn't a bad family man. But what he did do was invest the majority of his $87 million into development projects in Detroit. He grew up there, but in the 90s and early 2000s, the city was falling off hard. Attempting to revitalize Detroit, Coleman's desire to invest in the city clouded his judgment. According to his lawyer, Mark Burke, he stated, Mr. Coleman was focused on investing in various communities throughout the city of Detroit by developing real estate, creating jobs, and revitalizing business opportunities. But due to the state of the economy, including the decline in the real estate market, Mr. Coleman's investments could not be sustained. This was also around the time of the 2008 recession as well. Some of those investments included Hilton hotels and fast food chains, but he just couldn't capitalize on those, as it was a hard time for the entire country, and people weren't moving into Detroit as quickly as he hoped. While most of his wealth has vanished, Coleman still lives in Detroit, not living a luxurious life, but still content with what he's learned and what he's lost. Number 3. Dennis Rodman. Since Rodman's career was in the 80s and 90s, the salary back then wasn't as high, but he still managed to make $27 million. It was a lot back then. I mean, it's still a lot today, but players of his caliber make way more nowadays. His loss of wealth wasn't anything strange, it was the usual. Child support, luxury spending, partying a lot, living a lavish lifestyle, but to add on to that, he got scammed. Do you guys know of Peggy Fulford? She was a close friend of Rodman who managed to build a sports management business with him as a client, along with many others, including other NBA and NFL players. She called herself a financial advisor, and eventually, Peggy was given control of Rodman's bank account. Basically, she was involved in a massive scandal with herself at the center. At one point, she controlled 85 different bank accounts of famous athletes and celebrities, as she would move money from one account to another and spend money liberally and making herself rich. She was laundering millions through fake shell companies, but was eventually caught and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Unfortunately, Rodman was a victim of the scam and lost millions from that alone. It also doesn't help that he was involved in various crimes in recent years. DUI arrests, assaults, theft were only the surface of his issues. Number 2. Scottie Pippen. While Pippen did not go completely broke, he still lost the majority of his NBA earnings through various means. One time, he purchased a $4 million jet that didn't even work because he forgot to get someone to inspect it. Another time, he sued his own management firm, claiming that his losses from bad real estate investments were entirely their fault and not his own. This included a $3 million investment in Chicago, which ultimately failed, and Pippen lost most of that money. For a guy as talented and well-known as Pippen, you'd expect him to be, relaxing, basking in his riches, but instead, due to his enormous losses, he had to accept a job at ESPN as an analyst. Now, he has to continue working, despite most of his peers already being retired. It's great to see him there to get his perspective on the 90s and playing with MJ, but it's not something that he wanted to do, especially in his 50s. And number 1, Allen Iverson. Iverson made about $250 million in his NBA career, combining his salary and off-court endorsements. He completely breezed through that money. Granted, he does have a deal with Reebok that pays him $800,000 per year until he dies, but it's still a huge fall-off compared to how much he lost. In 2012, he told a judge that his yearly income was $800,000, but his yearly expenses were roughly $4 million. Maybe he's not completely broke now, but he'll get there pretty fast at this rate. Even Reebok might not save him. Iverson's basic monthly costs include over $30,000 in clothes, restaurants, and groceries. And sometimes, just like Antoine Walker, he would compulsively buy everything for his friends and family. Not only that, but Iverson apparently didn't trust any banks, and instead keep his money stored in garbage bags around his house. This led to numerous attempts at robbery, and even Iverson himself stated that he didn't keep track of his finances, so he wasn't sure if money ever got stolen or anything. During his prime, Iverson turned it up 10 notches, and was always infamous for his ridiculous spending habits. According to Matt Barnes, he would drop $30,000 to $40,000 at strip clubs every weekend. One time, he even forgot where he parked his car, so instead of looking for it, he bought a new one. Nowadays, he's just floating by now, and while I doubt he'll ever be homeless or anything due to his safety net, the amount of money he lost was still absolutely insane. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were 8 NBA players, most of which were former stars, who became broke and lost the majority of their wealth. It's an issue that's plagued professional athletes ever since the birth of professional sports, because these athletes tend to not know much about financial planning because they don't learn that. Fortunately, it's changing though. The NBA has started to launch programs for young players to manage their money. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.